Welcome everybody to the Startup Builder Q&A live stream. I'm Sarah Bell, I'm the host. I'm a co-founder at LeapSheep, and this is Kirk Drage, who is also a co-founder at LeapSheep and our CEO.
Hey,
It's
Sarah.
great to have you here. Hey Kirk. All right. Typically, we start this with just a very brief recap of who we are and why you might want to listen to us about startup building. I have been working with LeapSheep for 8 years. In that time, I have worked with hundreds of startups, all the way through from idea through to product market fit. Particular areas of expertise for me are customer discovery, finding those first customers, finding a pants on fire problem, and multiple course corrections in order to do so, as well as pitching, agile, and a few other things as well. Kirk, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Kirk Drage. I've spent the last 15 years dedicated in the startup space. I had a long career at Microsoft, where I also managed a startup and venture capital ecosystem across Asia, which is where I started off really learning deeply about the startup space. And since then, I've done all kinds of roles, including being an angel investor, working in Silicon Valley for a number of startups. And what I'm super passionate about is helping people succeed at their startup. And we just know that so many startups fail, not because people don't work hard enough, they don't have great ideas. They absolutely do. They just don't get the help they need, because it is really hard to learn the startup building journey while you're actually on the journey. And the ecosystem is really skewed towards finding those diamonds in the rough that can be accelerated into winners. That's really what the VCs are looking for. But the other 99.9% of people that aren't yet ready to be accelerated by a VC, they're trying to figure it out as they go along. And if we could solve that problem, we could radically change startup success rates.
All right, fabulous. That leads us nicely into our first question, which I will just add to the chat. Onto the screen here. So a question from a founder who I've met a few times, who has messaged me and said, I keep meeting people who say that the only way to learn is to fail and then learn from it. That fail fast mentality, which is rife in Seattle, by the way, puts me off starting a startup. Is there a way to shortcut to fail less? Kirk, what's your first thoughts on this?
Such a great question. I kind of, my first thought is I don't like that fail fast terminology, because I think it's, you want to learn quickly and cheaply and learn efficiently. I think that's a better mindset to have. Um, and your mindset really matters, and the language you use really matters in anything you do in life. And so that's my first thing is like, how can I learn quickly? And there's certainly there's certainly truth to the fact that you need to have real experience. I think building a startup is like a trade. It's like being an electrician or like being a plumber. You can't just learn the theory. You have to get out there and do it. And so a lot of the lessons that you need to learn, you have to learn by doing. But if you're learning by doing by yourself, and you're trying to figure out, what's the theory and what's the principles and what are good behaviors and what bad behaviors, if you're just sort of stumbling along, and just consuming whatever resources you can find on the internet and whatever people around you that you can talk to, the chances of you learning efficiently and learning cheaply are going to be very, very low. And so it's all about helping people undertake that learning journey with the right kind of support, because most founders will tell you that they have spent way more money than they need to learn the lessons that they've learned, and that there really should be a better way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think as well, one of the things that I notice with founders that we're working with week in, week out, is that you can have a theory, just like you said, you can have a theory of the types of customers that you're gonna pick, that you're gonna service first, or how the best way of actually meeting these customers is or are. But there's nothing quite like having a hypothesis and then doing it, and then the people that you thought would be desperate to hear about what you're doing don't care, or they don't like the way that you're talking, or the way that they talk is using completely different language to the way that you talk. And it's those kind of learnings that you don't have to fail, you can just experiment small by talking to one person at a time. It's a great reason why I really hate the use of surveys when you're trying to find out from people about some of their challenges and problems, is because you never get to practice how to ask the right questions or who to speak with. And of course, if you do that as a conversation one to one, then you can quickly update the way that you're speaking or respond to something somebody is saying. And that is a really great way of learning fast, as well as, of course, following and having a journey or a framework to actually follow.
Yeah, so true. And getting yourself set up um, uh, for undertaking this journey. So the question goes to, well, how can I learn faster and cheaper,
Mm.
and how can I do better quality experiments? And I think the short answer to that is, definitely don't quit your job and go, start building a startup if you don't know a lot about startups. Spend some time really trying to understand the space. There's a few really good books that you can read. I always like to point people to um, uh, uh, the four Steps to Epiphany by Steve Blank is a good one, or the Lean Startup. Either of those books are quite good. Lean Startup is more popular. And the other one is Peter Thiel's 0 to 1.
3 to 1.
I think it's also a really really good book. Um, and so just getting a couple of those basic resources under your belt to understand sort of how to think, and then start to actually build your startup. And what does that mean? It means the first thing that you should satisfy when you're building a startup, generally speaking, not true in every case, but in many cases, is to figure out, is there actually demand
Mm.
in the market for the idea that you've got, and learning to validate that problem, is it's a learning curve, because it's generally not something that we're taught. If you've been to university and done any kind of degree, whether it's a marketing, technical degree, or whatever, um, you're generally not going to learn techniques for how to validate market market need, and you're going to have to learn this through industry. And so you're going to have to read books or speak to people that are expert at this, and you need to surround yourself with people that are expert at these kind of things. And that's where I think the startup ecosystem often lets down founders, where early stage founders might, for example, go to networking events, startup networking events, or they might join hackathons. Generally, those kind of very early stage startup events don't have the quality of expertise to really know how to spend your time and money effectively to get the kind of results that you need early on. Those kind of events are fabulous for meeting people that have got similar mindsets to you,
Yes,
and you
generating
could find people
enthusiasm.
that getting enthusiasm, understanding, the day-to-day challenges of learning this journey, finding people with similar mindsets. It could be a co-founder or it could be employees. Those events are generally great for that. But your ability to get a lot of value out of those events means that you need a certain amount of startup street smarts, I like to call it. And in those events is not where you build your startup street smarts. You build your startup street smarts by getting out there and talking to customers,
Yeah.
and just realizing how challenging it is to find a group of people, like a market, that all have the same problem that want it solved in the same way, and realizing that that is a real challenge. And the more you can speak to experienced founders, very experienced founders, and very experienced investors, the more likely you are to get the right kind of coaching and advice and guidance. And so figure out a way to get to those people, and have them teach you and understand what the journey is all about.
Yeah. Okay, all right. I'm going to move on to the next question. I keep having ideas, and this actually was me probably 20 years ago. I keep having ideas that I think are good ideas, but I never actually act on them. What are the first steps to go from an idea into actually building a startup?
Yeah, another great question. So one of the most important things as you start to validate just how good is an idea is, can you turn the idea into a sustainable business model
Mm.
that has a real potential to get the product market fit? And if you're at that stage where you're still just having ideas, not sure where to go forward, you probably have no idea what I just said. Because I'm using words like product market fit, which may be new to you. So it's really, really important that you understand what product market fit is, using a very disciplined definition. And I love some of the content from Y Combinator that calls out this issue that most founders just don't have a disciplined enough definition of product market fit, and it's causing them to fail. So it's really important that you understand what that is and have a very disciplined definition of it, and understand the role of product market fit, and then be able to express your idea in terms of a business model. So a business model is, how am I going to attract the customers? How am I going to market and make people aware of this product that I've got, and that I can solve a problem that they've got? And how you're going to convert them into paying customers, and then what's the value that you've got? And so building that idea into a business model and then starting to stress test that. And most founders tend to spend more time on the solution side than they do on the what we call the buy side or the demand side.
Mm.
And this is where most founders get caught out. Particularly if you come from a technical background, you know a lot about the solution side. You've probably got enough experience to know how to build the solution, but you radically underestimate how difficult it is to sell it into the market.
Mm.
And so every step that you take on that journey of learning and understanding of solving the you don't know what you don't know problem, you just get a little bit wiser. Every step you take forward, you get a little bit wiser. And so you have to feel your way forward here, to get from an idea to sketch out exactly what it would look like to build a business. I think it's really important to say, what would I not do? Things that I've done, for example, in the past is you have an idea and you go, well, maybe I could go speak to an accountant and they could help me with the finances of the idea, or maybe I could go speak to a software developer and they could help me, with the software development side, or maybe I could speak to a lawyer, or a patent attorney. And generally speaking, and there are definitely exceptions, but generally speaking, most of those professional service business support functions that you meet don't understand how to help entrepreneurs. They understand how to help established business people. And so the kind of advice and guidance that you're going to get is not going to solve what we call the 0 to 1 problem, which is what Peter Thiel talks about, which is how do you go from nothing to a validated business model that's actually worth building. And most of the professional services world is totally optimized and only experienced in proven established business models. And so that's something that's really, really, really important, because we meet so many founders which are just going round and round and round in circles talking to people that have got lots of experience in the established business world, but are not giving founders the advice and guidance that they really need to move forward in an effective way, and end up wasting their time and their money.
Mm. Interestingly, a different perspective on that is I met a few kind of marketing agencies and software development agencies last week, and they were saying that of all the founders that they typically work with, often founders are keen to skip that customer discovery step, and move straight to developing software. And I think a lot of that is because the ecosystem is all about that, build fast, fail fast. And actually, that step is the most critical step, so that you don't build a product, get it into the market, and then no one cares, no one's interested, no one's talking to people about it. And so that customer discovery, that getting from 0 to 1, is the most critical step that a startup founder can make. And on the flip side, I was lucky enough to meet a founder last week who has massive market need, but now isn't sure about the product side. And it's like, yeah, but once you've got market demand and market need, the product almost writes itself, as long as you're disciplined enough to do that user research, find out about those individual people, what their challenges are, what success looks like for them, and work out what those key pants on fire problems are, so that you can then start to think about a solution concept. And a key framework that I really like, and I'm always reminded of the value of, is value proposition design, which Alex Osterwalder started. And that core canvas is a great way to go from a collection of problems that you found in a beachhead customer segment, to then help you to start to brainstorm what that first product looks like, or what that first MVP looks like.
Yeah, so true. And I think it's worth giving a shout out to professional service firms that actually care about this, because there's a lot of
Yes.
professional services firms that don't care.
Mm.
They're like, I'll just take your money, build whatever you want. And
Mm.
sometimes that's conscious, willful blindness.
Yeah.
Other times that's just naivety. But there are also a lot of professional services firms that we meet that just like, how do I help these founders?
Yeah.
How can I support them? They know that they should be doing customer discovery, but they know that the founders have got it in their head they're going to push forward anyway.
Mm.
And so I think the best thing you can do if you're a professional service firm owner and you're in this challenge of how can I help these founders like genuinely move forward better, I think the most important thing is make sure that you're able to refer them to other people that are going to tell them the same thing, like go do customer discovery. Because this is the number one problem that we see with founders, I think, is that you give a founder some good advice, and one of the main reasons they don't follow it is because the rest of their network is unaware of the startup world and are giving them the same bad advice as everybody else. And so the best thing you can do for a founder is to help get as much support around them so that they're hearing from completely different people. So there's no sort of vested interest in anyone selling anybody to anything to anyone. And then the founder can see, oh, all these clever people are all saying the same thing. Perhaps I should follow that advice.
Yeah, true. One of the challenges with that, though, is that I think there's so many people with so many conflicting ideas. Some are the same, some are different, and I think it also adds to the noise. One of the reasons why I'm so keen for LeapSheep to be successful is for our philosophy to become completely mainstream. And so if people aren't following LeapSheep methodology, then they're getting challenged on why not. So kind of flipping exactly what's happening right now, but in the opposite way. And I think as it becomes so much cheaper and easier and to build products, no code software, for example, I think the balance is going to flip back in the other direction, towards, it's like we have to find that specific niche beachhead customer. You have to find that pants on fire problem. And that's my philosophy anyway, and I'm sticking by it.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's worth digging down on that, because I think this is one of the things I hear all the time from, for example, accelerator program operators, where they say, "Oh, we've got this, we've got a broad selection of mentors, and therefore founders can get a broad selection of opinions on, what they should do." And while perspective and diversity and lived experience is, undeniably of large value, there's also a problem in the startup world where the fundamentals that shouldn't be up for debate and shouldn't be up for diversity, for example, like doing, good quality customer discovery and customer research, that there shouldn't be diversity of opinion on that. Everybody should have that opinion. If you want to manage your startup risk and you want to use your resources really well and you want to understand what does quality look like for your customer, I don't know of a situation where you wouldn't do customer discovery. And so if you're meeting mentors or you're meeting advisors or you're meeting people in your network that are not advising you on that front, then there's a problem with your network. And so it's about saying, I think it's about the ecosystem acknowledging that we actually have a problem in the startup ecosystem where when we're supporting founders, we're not putting them in front of quality enough people that agree on some fundamentals, because that's just creating more noise for founders, as you say, and it's not really solving the problem for them, which is what is the best practice. I need diversity of opinion on the things that are not clear and they haven't yet been resolved. But I think something like customer discovery has been absolutely resolved as a very clear startup best practice that everyone should be adopting.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Kirk, I'm just going to turn this question off for a second. We were having an interesting conversation earlier in the week, which I think it's worth bringing up now. One of the things that you mentioned was that you can't necessarily predict startup success, but you can predict ways that startups can fail so that you can avoid them. I'd be interested for you to talk a little more about that.
Yeah. It's one of the philosophies that we have at LeapSheep, isn't it? That the role of a VC firm, their job is to predict winners, and the large VC firms have got a lot of analysts, and they're doing a lot of data driven. The top ones are doing a lot of data driven analysis on the deal flow, and they're really trying to look for what are the factors that drive winners. In a lot of cases, in the companies that we're dealing with, where we're not necessarily picking winners to work with, we're trying to democratize the access to really high quality advice and guidance, so you don't have to meet that bar. It's like the VC firms are a little bit like Harvard business model, but there's this massive barrier to entry, and that very very few people are going to get in, and we're really trying to democratize that sort of Harvard style education, if you sort of follow that analogy. And so we're trying to radically improve success rates, and there is so much startup failure, over 50%. The data is like super clear on this. That founders are failing because of known failure modes. That if we could just get the right information to founders at the right time, we could solve that problem. So if we just removed all those known failure modes, the chances of startup success and the rates of startup success, it's our hypothesis, will go radically upwards. So any founder that we meet, the most important thing I think we can do to help them is to figure out what are those things that they're doing that we know are going to lead to failure, because we just see it all the time. Like, we just had this conversation about customer discovery and not knowing your customer. And so you can just meet a founder and you can just go, look, I know that you haven't done your customer discovery either at all, or you've done it, but you haven't done it to a quality level that's going to get the result that you need to really validate your business model. And there is a ton of things that sit in this category of known ways that founders fail.
Yeah.
And if we can just remove all of those, then the startup success rates are going to go up massively.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. All right, I'll come on to the next question. So, okay, here we go. And this kind of leads nicely on from what we were just talking about. So I did do a TikTok video this week, which I think also went up on LinkedIn, which was comparing me as an English person hiking in America to the unknown unknowns of when you start a startup. And this particular person messaged me and asked, how do I know what these unknown unknowns are? And whilst they do vary dependent on a founder, their experience, there are a few unknown unknowns that I think we would say are kind of a pretty clear, that often trip up almost any founder. One of the key ones that I think trips people up is the premise that, well, I'm just going to get as far as I can with the product and then pitch, and I'll just be able to raise capital, and that will pay for me to actually be able to launch that product, perhaps from a prototype or just the promise. And whilst that may be true if you perhaps have already exited multiple startups, or if you are really, really well connected in Silicon Valley, or were ex Microsoft, ex Amazon, ex Google on your first startup, also really well connected. That kind of goal of being able to raise capital for an idea is just not reality for, I would say, 99.9% of founders. And so I think that is definitely something that I see trips founders up all of the time. And of course, if I can't raise VC, then perhaps I'll be able to get angel investment or crowdfunding. And of course, right now is probably some of the harshest conditions that we've seen in the market for fundraising ever. But even without that, I think the kind of hopeful naivety of being able to raise capital is just not a truth for really most founders. Any other unknown unknowns that kind of come top of mind?
Just to continue on that one, because I think this such an important one.
Mm.
One of the concepts that Peter Thiel goes through in his book 0 to 1 is indefinite optimism and definite optimism, and the role that plays. And he talks about indefinite optimism as someone or a group of people that have a concept of an idea of a better future, but no real clear plan to get there. And
Yeah.
what happens in that world is that if I say, hey Sarah, I'm building this amazing startup that's going to solve affordable housing or something like that, hopefully you're going to go, wow Kirk, that's amazing, that's such an important problem, I hope you're successful, and you're going to become a cheerleader for me, which is so often what happens for founders. Is people around founders genuinely want to see those founders succeed and they want to support them, so they're rah giving you that moral support. But without a plan, you can't really critique that founder on whether they're likely to get there or not, or whether their plan's any good or not. And so Peter Thiel talks about definite optimism, where he uses, I think, the Manhattan Project as an example of when governments had a very, very clear goal and a very clear process to get there. JFK getting man on the moon is another example of definite optimism. I've got a very clear goal and I've got a very clear strategy and approach to get there. And it seems that more and more governments have fallen into this trap of indefinite optimism, where they just paint this vague picture of the future, like we want to become a hydrogen hub. What does that mean? What are the goals? It's not like landing a man on the moon. It's a very specific goal, and I can measure success by. And founders, I think, fall into this trap of indefinite optimism. And so it's so important that you have a very definite, clear plan that you can get critiqued on.
Mm.
And if you're not able to do that and get that critique, then you're probably going to waste a lot of time and energy spinning your wheels, maybe feeling good about what you're doing, but not actually making progress.
Mm. Yeah, I love that idea, because I do think of having a plan and a strategy to execute, and then the ability to course correct that plan very regularly. And obviously, within LeapSheep, for us, that's the disruptive innovation journey, surrounded by multiple other pathways that kind of spin along behind the scenes on building a team and operating your business. Yeah, that strategy is absolutely critical. And I think the nearest alternative that I can think of is Steve Blank in Steve Blank's startup book, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's the one after the 4 steps of the epiphany.
The
Startup
Startup
Owners
Owners
Manual.
Handbook.
Startup
Yeah,
Owners Manual.
yeah,
Yeah, because that does have a pretty clear process from going from idea through to product market fit. The challenge, of course, is that a book is very hard to follow and very hard to work out course corrections from. But I'd say, if you're a founder out there and you're looking for kind of a plan, then that is a pretty good one. We also have some newsletters and videos of our disruptive innovation journey that are also kind of set out a pretty decent strategy to get to product market fit. Any other unknown unknowns that you want to call out here, Kirk?
Oh, look, there's a ton, and we know Sarah every day we're having discussions. We have a channel in our company Slack called Ahas, and we're constantly encouraging the team to post ahas, and a lot of that is unknown unknowns, and a lot of those unknown unknowns are things that you kind of know, but then you have some sort of experience to go, yeah, it just reinforces just how important that is, and you can't not not take heed of that. And so I think it's really important um, to create a culture within your startup that you're continually looking that horizon scanning to find those unknown unknowns, and share your journey of discovery and enlightenment with people around you, and let them critique you and add their enlightenment, because that sort of tends to pile on top of each other and accelerate everyone's progress as part of that.
Yeah, I'd say if I had to reflect back on one of the unknown unknowns that tripped us up a little bit as we've been building LeapSheep, I would say probably our public presence in terms of building our credibility and thought leadership outside of our subscriber base is probably an
100%.
unknown that tripped us up. We certainly were of the mindset that we had a referral mechanism, we had a way that we met founders, typically through events. This is pre-pandemic, and then of course we expected that those referrers would continue to build our audience, and our credibility would shine through from founder testimonials, founder successes, and of course that has worked to a certain extent, but we were certainly later on the journey of building thought leadership outside of our customer base. That was certainly an unknown that I would say was one that definitely has held us back a little, that we are certainly on
Huge.
the road to fixing now.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that the approach that we were taking was following some researched best practice advice and guidance. Building a company in stealth,
Mm.
where you don't try and announce to the world what you're doing. You just look for paying customers or potential paying customers, and you nurture them, and then you just build and build and build until you get to product market fit, and then you announce to the world. So Palantir is a great example of a company that's gone down that path. They were very much in stealth. No one really knew what they were doing until they really got to product market fit, and they've opened up a lot more. So that was sort of almost a best practice approach, but the information world has moved so much. The media consumption landscape, should I say, has really moved so much that I don't think that's necessarily a good strategy for most companies now. And we've certainly got caught out by that. Yeah, that was an unknown for us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you look at some of the trends, um, everything is going, like all of marketing channels, particularly TikTok in particular, is very kind of like hyper specific, very very specific niche content, um, for niche problems. And that hyper specificity is, I think, going to be interesting when we've been used to unicorns like Airbnb, Uber, others, where they've had a very broad base. And it's going to be interesting to see how that move towards hyper specificity actually manifests with successful startups.
Yeah, and it's because of that changing media landscape. When those
Mm.
companies started, the media landscape was so different, so
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, no, and which brings me on to your next question about generative AI. So, how is generative AI going to positively or negatively impact my startup?
Yeah, what an important question that every founder should be asking. Um, I just love the quote that you hear pretty regularly to say that AI is not going to take my job. It's people with AI, people using AI that's going to take my job. And we know that's not entirely true because jobs are disappearing in their entirety because of AI. But generally speaking, particularly if you're a startup, um, you've got to be thinking about how can I adopt and take advantage of AI. It's a bit like electricity. When electricity came along and we were still using steam powered engines, to not look at how you could integrate using electricity in your business, it kind of doesn't make sense, particularly in hindsight. So I think you have to look at ways that you can take advantage of generative AI, and there's two sort of I think critical ways of looking at it. One is, how can I use generative AI to improve the customer experience? How can I solve either my customer problem better, make it more convenient, make it faster, um, improve the quality level, improve the choice. Look at all of those things. So if you don't have we use the term a business process map in LeapSheep to talk about what's the customer's problem, and that problem will have a trigger that causes that problem to become conscious, and the customer wants to solve it. What's the endpoint for success? What are all the steps in the middle that the customer has to go through to get to success, whether you're there as a supplier, a solution or not? They're generally going to have to go through these steps. So that might be, I don't know. I want to publish a high school yearbook. What's the trigger for that? Well, maybe a certain month every year we start the process, so it's a time-based trigger. And then what's success? It's the students and parents have got the yearbook in their hands and they love it, and they're posting pictures of it on Facebook and online. That might be the endpoint success. What are all the steps that you need to go through to get that outcome? If you've sort of mapped out your problem space, then you can really start to look at each one of those steps. Are you involved in providing a solution to your customers today in one or more of those steps? And then, can you use generative AI to create a better outcome for those steps? And you may decide that you can do things that you couldn't do before. Parts of the problem for the customer that you left to the customer to solve, you can now solve for them because
Right.
generative AI allows you to do that. Or you could do things to a higher quality level. But the most important thing is you've always got to look at the value relative to the customer. Like, just introducing generative AI because you can doesn't make any sense. It's just spending resources for resources' sake. You need to go to the customer and say, where are the friction points? Where are the pain points? What do you wish you had that was better? And again, you need to look at the customer's needs, not their wants. They'll tell you what they want, but they don't necessarily know what they need because they don't know what's possible. So you have to go through the user research process that we've talked a lot about to really deeply understand what the customer really needs, and then figure out if there's generative AI solutions that you can add into your product portfolio that's going to create a better customer experience. And then the other use case for generative AI is then more around your employee productivity and lowering your costs, and thinking about what can we do on the back end in terms of delivery of our service that's going to make us more efficient and therefore more profitable.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I've been experimenting particularly with ChatGPT to see to what extent you can use ChatGPT to generate user research interviews. So I've plugged in kind of we have a fictional startup that we use called Mealbotics to demonstrate all of our points through LeapSheep kind of advice and guidance and frameworks. And I put our user research framework and the ideal customer of Mealbotics into ChatGPT to try and get an idea of what ChatGPT would say about their problems. And of course, the types of statements that come back are very generic. They're not the kind of statements that a person would actually say, and they certainly don't get to the real real pain points that are, in this instance, one of the customer segments is principals of high schools, and it just can't do it because the way that people talk and the way that they think and then adjust what they say, and the kind of problems that you would tell some of your closest friends, or if you're at the pub and you might tell somebody like, oh, I've had the worst day, this has happened, and I'm not sure when generative AI will get to that. I mean, probably in a few years perhaps, but it certainly is not there for now. And really nothing beats a really well structured conversation with the person to really uncover what those pain points are, for
Yeah,
sure.
I think you're highlighting one of the hardest things about AI is figuring out, is it ready for my use
Yeah.
case, whatever your use case is, and
Mm,
unless you put it carving out a little bit of time to do some discovery to figure out what's even out there,
mm,
and then start to experiment with these use cases as you are,
mm.
and all of us are doing it on the team, then
Yeah.
you're just not going to know. And
No.
unfortunately, it's just like a tax on running a business these days. Is you
Yeah.
just have to put aside a certain amount of time to do this horizon scanning. Otherwise, someone else could discover, a great new feature that you don't have, and
Mm.
radically change the dynamic of the landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on your second point around using generative AI to make employees more productive, I did experiment a few weeks ago with I crafted the post for my LinkedIn, and started with a hook, and then kind of talk more about the kind of underlying detail, and then a call to engage at the end. And then LinkedIn had this feature which was rewrite with AI, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll experiment with that, and it did it. And then I think I posted it, and I got four comments from different members of our team going, "What on earth was that? Like, why? That sounded really weird." Like, okay, I won't use LinkedIn AI again. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I think watching humans try out different AI functionality is going to be kind of a source of amusement for the next at least 6 months. And just like you get all these kind of comedy videos on YouTube of animals doing cute things, it's like humans using AI and coming up with weird or stupid things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it reminds me of someone. I have ideas constantly, prolifically having ideas, as a lot of founders and entrepreneurs do, and how that can
Mm,
be a little bit of a curse because you can look at some of these new technologies, you can think of so many ways they could be used,
mm,
but what you end up doing is spending a lot of time spinning your wheels on the supply side of innovation
mm.
and
Yeah.
startup building, and you don't spend enough time on the demand side. And you have to have a paying customer to make any of the supply side worthwhile.
Mm.
So really, really, really important to focus on the demand side and figure out where is the demand, and don't worry too much about the supply side because there's no point building things that no one wants.
Yeah, exactly. I saw there was a great post that popped up on my LinkedIn yesterday, and it had, for all of the, well, not all, but for many of the current unicorns, and I'd include like Discord, Canva, Facebook, Airbnb. All of them started with finding a very specific demand side, and they started there first. And I saw this infographic which showed all of those, and I'll re-find it and post it on my LinkedIn, because that, being able to see how many different startups found that demand side, I think is critical to show how starting with the demand side first is the right way to go. It was a
Yeah,
great infographic. I will find it.
so important. Yeah, I was talking to some folks in the university space, commercializing university IP this week, and
Mm,
just horrified how much time and energy and effort people are spending driving up technology readiness levels, trying to
yeah.
mature technology when there's no demand. They've got no validation there's any demand at all, and there's literally hundreds of millions of dollars being wasted. If we could redirect all of that energy and expertise into understanding demand, because there are thousands of problems out there that people actually want solved and would pay for to have
Mm,
solved, but they're just too hidden, and that's
yeah.
really where we need to focus our energy and effort.
Yeah, I know. That's a big ship to turn.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, all right. Now this is an interesting question. Again, I keep seeing more and more about founder temperament, and what's the traits that make a great founder. And so this question really gets to the heart of that. I've been working on my startup for a few months. It's a step forward and then many back. How do I know if I have what it takes to actually build this startup? It's a great question, and I would say that probably in 50% of the one-to-ones I have with founders, this crops up from time to time. It's like, do I have what it takes? Am I just, beating my head against a brick wall? So I'd be interested in your opinion on this, and then I'll certainly add mine.
Yeah, it's a good question. I continue to ask myself. I mean, I remember as a kid, high school doing marathon running, and you just get to this point in a marathon where you're like, I'm so tired. Like, wouldn't it be just easier to like give up right now? It's just this is just drudgery at this point. And somehow you've got to find that mental, the mental will to keep going. And I think a lot of athletes will tell you that it's just as much a mental game as it is a physical game. And I think startup building is no different in that way. You're going to get punched in the face so many times building your startup, and you're going to build things that you pour your heart and your soul into, and people are going to say, "Not interested, don't care," and you've got to have a way of creating that mental fortitude to be able to keep going. And that's where one solving a problem that actually has real demand. I mean, the thing that really motivates me is talking to founders that need help. And so, if I'm ever feeling less than energized, I can just go spend some time with founders that need help, and I can see that they're struggling. I can add immediate value, and I can go, boy, this is a really worthwhile pursuit. And so that sort of provides a bit of reassurance that it's worth time solving the problem that you're solving, but it also reminds me that I have what it takes to support founders to reach higher success rates. But I think it's a lot of that alignment of, is there market demand? Because you can work as hard and as smart as you want in your startup. If there's no market demand, you will not succeed. And sometimes that looks like, I don't have what it takes, but it's not that you don't have what it takes. It's just that you're trying to work in a market that there's no demand. So it's really important that you understand the context of, do I have what it takes? So you've got to have that demand. You've got to have the ability to supply a solution that is, and in using Peter Thiel's word, 10x better than the alternative. Because if there's not enough differential between the way that people do things now and the way that you want people to do things, then the inertia of moving is going to be too much. And so you've got to have the supply side sort of sorted as well. And then to get that supply and demand really working and get to product market fit, we know it's a very long journey. In many cases, it's years. And so you've got to have the commitment and the passion to maintain yourself on that journey. And that's where I think I heard this the other day described, not as passion, which I think passion seems to be a little bit, it's going to sound funny, I think, but it can seem a little bit superficial, like do what you're passionate about. A better way, I think, to describe it is, look for your deep core of your personality. What is it that you keep coming back to? What can you go back to from your early childhood right through to where you are, that you continue to do over and over again, that you just seem to naturally gravitate there? And for me, I love researching things, and then I love building systems. And I've just done that over and over again in my life and my career. And so LeapSheep is that. Like, we're researching startup best practice. We're building a system to turn that best practice into a system so we can diagnose and prescribe things. And that's just something that I've done for my entire career. So that, I wouldn't say that's my passion. I'm not sure that I'd describe that as my passion, but it's just my core personality. It's who I am. It's what I enjoy doing. It's what I'm sort of drawn to. But if someone asked me what my passion is, it wouldn't be, researching and creating systems wouldn't be the answer that I provided. So I think it's really sort of deeply understanding, who you are and what you're doing, and then making sure you've got the right support team around you to be able to be successful.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And again, this is where you get a benefit from having multiple diverse people on a team. Because if I had to describe yours and my personalities and temperaments and skills, Kirk, I would say, we're fairly opposite on the spectrum of all of those things.
100%.
You trend more towards perfectionist. I tend to go for progress over perfection. I'm certainly more on the extroverted side of things. You more on the introverted. You're much more of a deep thinker. I'm much more of a doer, and then perhaps a correct. Like I like to, if I get something wrong, then I'll correct it. Or, and a phrase we use often is, I have strong opinions, but they're loosely held. Um, and
Totally.
finding and you were lucky enough to come across me, really.
So fortunate, I can't even tell
Yeah.
you, Sarah.
In terms of actually building this business along with our other co-founders and other team members as well. But I do think if you are lucky enough to find and be able to work well with people that have those different temperaments, I think another thing I would think that I bring to the table is enthusiasm. Although certainly Peter Thiel's definition of definite and indefinite optimism, it's like must stay more on the definite optimism. But yeah, it's so critical. And it leads me actually to the next question that I'm going to bring up, which is what skills do I need to start a startup? And this has
Okay.
come up for me actually 4 times this week in 4 different one-to-one sessions that I've run with founders from Australia and the US. And particularly the skills around that. And I'd say it's not so much skills, but it's where are you going to be spending your time when you first start a startup. And there's typically there is a bit around the research, so things like what are the trends headed in the right direction, so that you're getting the right timing. There's researching your competitors, and understanding what solutions people are using to try and solve a problem if they have one. There's research into the industry itself and the size of the market, and what people are spending in the market. And those research skills they're important, but really in those very early stages, actually a lot of it is actually having the confidence and the listening skills to go and actually have a conversation to validate that there's market need and market demand. And the more, and again, I think you and I come at this with slightly different perspectives. I think we agree completely on the fact that the research is important and that the customer discovery and the conversations with customers are important. I
Yeah.
think what my firm opinion is that if you're willing and able to go to where your potential customers are, whether that's in real life or whether it's online, in Discord, on TikTok, in Instagram channels, in Facebook groups, in meetups, in coffee shops, or in dog parks, wherever your potential customers hang out, if you can go and have a conversation and listen to what those people are telling you, rather than talking to them about your solution idea, to me it's that critical skill that's the absolute requirement for starting a startup. And anything else I think you can learn, but those listening skills, that's absolutely critical.
So true. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And you find that founders develop their listening skills if they stay in the game long enough.
Yeah.
When they build a product and nobody wants it,
Yeah.
and they're not ready to give up, and they've still got the resources to continue, it's like maybe I need to go back and listen a bit harder.
Mm,
So yeah, building
yeah.
those skills early.
Mm. One of my favourite founders, who I won't name, but I remember when we met him probably 6 or 7 years ago, I think he said to you, I'm going to build the first $1 billion company from Adelaide. And then went off, kind of built what he thought, and then has completely course corrected, listened to what the market has needed, completely switched markets, switched problems, switched solutions,
Switch
has
teams.
yeah, switch teams, and is now, absolutely really doing well. Kind of built a big team, reached product market fit, scaling outside of Australia. Yeah, and he definitely learned listening skills. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
which was
But
great to see.
it's a great example of what you really need is you need vision
Mm,
and passion to
yeah.
want to build a company from 0 to 1,
Mm,
and you've got to have persistence. And the growth mindset is something that I've really sort of started to clarify around growth mindset more recently, and this is maybe just an aha that I didn't understand this concept deeply enough.
mm,
Was when I first think about growth mindset is, are you sort of willing to take on new things and new points of view and new perspective, and not just sort of put the hand up and go, no, that's not for me. And that's only part of growth mindset. The other part of growth mindset is stopping doing things that you already do and be willing to let things go. And there's so many founders that we meet that have got the first part of growth mindset. You can give them new advice and guidance, and they go, "Oh yeah, I'll take that on. That's great." But then when you say, "And you need to stop doing this thing that you're currently doing," that's where things are much harder for people. And so having a real growth mindset that includes both of those things, I think, is absolutely critical.
One way that I like to talk to founders about that is, and which is a way to make sure that you're stopping doing things that you don't need to be doing, is having really clear goals that are documented, written down, and cover 3 core areas: your financial goals, customer goals, and then employee experience goals. And customer includes customer and product, and then employee is kind of everything to do with your employee experience, and then I would say also back end of the product. Having those goals really nailed down with specific outputs that are going to help to achieve the goals and metrics to be able to measure them, and then transforming those goals into, right, well, everything that I do, am I directly impacting one of those top priority goals? And if I'm not, then either the goals need to change, or the activities that I'm spending my time on need to change. And being able to use agile across a whole business, having stand-ups, sprint cycles, 2-week sprint cycles, stand-ups along the way, and then a showcase and retrospective at the end to look at kind of what went well, what didn't go so well, kind of, and to what extent you made progress towards those goals. That is a really concrete way of being able to really specifically make sure that you stay on track. And if you're a solo founder, you need to be disciplined enough to do it just for yourself. And if you're a team, then you've got the luxury of having other team members who are empowered to challenge you if you are not doing things that directly respond to your goals. One of my biggest challenges, I think, is the sheer volume of networking events that I could go to in order to meet founders and talk to founders. And in the context of all of the other priorities, to me, networking events seem like a really good use of time. But then actually, it's something that is a bit of a challenge in terms of the context of everything else. And sometimes you have to make a choice over which of them to go to versus not.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Got to be super clear on your priorities.
Anything, Kirk, that you think that you spend time on that because you like it and you're good at it and you're comfortable there, but things that actually you probably need to stop doing?
What's a good one in that? I mean, the thing that's sort of completely absorbing my mind at the moment is actually the things that I'm not good at, that I need to get better at. So, for example, I think I've always been relatively good at communicating in presentations. I've done a lot of presentations and keynotes and those kind of communication. But what I'm not as strong at is written communication, and particularly written communication in a marketing and sales context. And so I'm finding that incredibly frustrating at the moment too, because I'm sort of at the bottom of the ladder when it comes to skills and competence. It's taking me incredibly long time to do things, and my productivity is really low. But it's such an important skill to have to develop that. And so overly focusing on that for me, I think, is the right thing to do, because it's just so critical. And some people could say, "Oh, can't you just hire somebody to do that?" And at some point you can, but there's so many things when you're building a startup that have to be founder led, and you have to know enough about quality. Like, there's no point hiring somebody if you can't assess their quality. And so part of that skill development for me is like building that strength so that I can really assess others' quality, and then I'll be able to get others in to assist.
Okay, that's a really good question that I'm gonna add to the list, which is, what if I'm a founder, and I'm starting up, what do I need to learn and do myself, and what can I get other people to do? So if you'd like to start with, what if you're a founder, what is it that you need to be doing yourself? You can't outsource it.
Wow. So this, I think, is a really, really personal question. It's a question that really needs diagnosing a specific founder situation to get to a good answer. I think this is what we do a really, really good job at LeapSheep is doing that diagnosis piece, because everyone is so different. We meet founders, we like to call them the army of one founders, that are just super productive. They've got tons of experience and they're just getting stuff done. And they quite often got contractors doing things for them, and they're really good at delegating work. But where they typically begin to hit a real barrier is when they have to collaborate with others. They generally have an entire plan in their head, and they're just like, you do this, you do this, you do this, and that's extremely efficient because they don't have to write the plan down. They don't have to communicate the plan to anyone. They just execute, execute, execute. But they get to a point then they have to hire somebody that is a peer to them, and they have to begin to communicate, and they have to agree and align on a plan, and then people want to potentially change the plan, or maybe say, why are we doing it this way? Couldn't we do it that way? And that is incredible productivity sink for that kind of individual, and they require a lot of help to get over that hump. And then you have other people which come from a different skill set. Maybe they're really good in one particular area, like they might be really strong in marketing, or really strong in finance, or really strong in software development, and they need more and more rounded skill set. And so it depends on their personality type as to what things they should take on themselves and what things they can delegate. So if you're like you, Sarah, if you're an extrovert and you really love meeting with people, more of a front-facing people role, you're going to naturally build the skills and experience to do those sorts of things. So, the user research, the customer success kind of roles. If you've got a direct selling role, those sorts of things are going to come much more naturally to you, and you really want to take advantage of the productivity and passion and sort of base personality traits to help do those things. And you want to look for someone else that you can bring in to do things that perhaps is not you. If it's attention to detail, or if it's analytical skills, or whatever that's just not your strong point, then you're going to have to figure out how you bring people in. So it's such a personal question.
There's a few core things that I always like to say to founders, which are, your first 100 sales has to be you, has to be the founder that's making those first sales, because you're learning so much about how the customer is talking, what things that they're saying that perhaps only you as a founder or co-founder would actually know what to do with, like, different ways of talking about the problem, or perhaps a completely new problem that hadn't been on your radar that's a lot more compelling, that you can then kind of adapt, whether you adapt, I mean, it may not be big enough to adapt the product, but certainly the way that you talk about the product. I'd say that's the kind of thing that you would never want to outsource too early on, until you've got a repeatable process for finding customers and a repeatable process for selling to customers.
100%. I think
yeah.
Yeah, what you're describing there, I think, Sarah, is what must the company do internally. So there's sort of the individual personal perspective, which is a lot of what I was talking about, and now what you're describing is, as you say, if you need to do that first 100 sales yourself, you don't want to employ a salesperson to do that, because they don't have the passion and commitment and desire like you do to really get it right. If a great salesperson is going to be skilled at selling, and they just want to know who's the ideal customer, what's the product, what's the benefits, how can I articulate those benefits? And of course, none of those things are really clear in the beginning, which is why, as you say, a founding member of the team really has to do that. Because you're like an AI learning engine. Every customer call that you have, you learn a little bit more, and you're creating that process that you can eventually hand over to a professional salesperson to go, there's the unique things that you need to know about our customers and our business to enable your selling skills to be successful. And so figuring out what's the right team structure, I think, is part of that question that you've just articulated there. Is maybe you need a co-founder if you're like super shy and you may be struggling with language because you come from a different country or something like that. You may need to get a co-founder that's a real co-founder that's in the boat with you. It's got risk on the line with you, to be able to do those things. So team structure is another area where we really spend a lot of time with founders to figure out what's the right team structure. If you get that wrong, you're going to burn a lot of resources.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. All right, we're about to be at time. Somehow the hour has flown by again. Now, just to recap, kind of, LeapSheep, kind of what we're about. We are literally on a mission to flip the 95% startup failure rate and create many, many, many more successful founders by supporting founders on the journey to product market fit, kind of helping you to avoid common mistakes that send startups to the startup graveyard, and maximize your use of your resources, your energy, your time, your effort, and your money to get to product market fit as efficiently as possible. If you've enjoyed the conversation that Kirk and I have had here and the answers to some of the questions, and you want a more personalized response to your own situation, then please do use this QR code or go to Kirk or my bios on LinkedIn and book a strategy session. And we're very happy to talk individually with you about your specific situation. All right. Thanks very much, Kirk, for your time, and see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks as always, Sarah. Take care.
Take care. Bye.